Tonight, Keir Starmer tells MPs he's been cleared, but admits that Downing Street asked about a diplomatic job for his top spin doctor.
That puts to bed all the allegations levelled at me by those opposite in relation to dishonesty.
I am amazed at the level of chuntering from Labour MPs. He promised them probity. What he's given them is cronyism and an old boys club where Matthew Doyle is being proposed as an ambassador.
It's not a case of if, it's when Labour MP Jonathan Brash says Starmer should go. And next week, it's the turn of his former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, to be grilled over the Mandelson scandal. Plus, with more ships attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, former BP boss Lord Brown tells us why the government needs to get drilling in the North Sea. And the bombshell poll that shows London could be turning against Labour. We will ride the polar coaster this evening with James Lyons and Dehenna Davison, who will be with me for the next hour. It is Wednesday. I'm Matt Barbet, live from Westminster. This is the Politics Hub. Good evening. There's already been one high-profile sacking today, but it was Chelsea manager Liam Rosenior, not the Prime Minister. That Arsenal fan is still in the job and thinks his tricky run is behind him. Keir Starmer told MPs today that all the allegations made against him over Peter Mandelson have now been put to bed by the former Foreign Office chief, Ollie Robbins. But the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, is still calling on Labour MPs to force him out over the scandal. It appears that at least one of them agrees. Jonathan Brash, who represents Peter Mandelson's old Hartlepool seat, says he is sick of the psychodrama and Starmer should go. Here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
That wasn't the first, and it won't be the last, but it was the latest time that Kemi Badenoch called on Keir Starmer to resign, and she's not the only one. And it all goes back to that disastrous decision he made to appoint Peter Mandelson, a close friend of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, to the ambassador post in Washington, D.C. I know it's easy to get bogged down in the process, the timeline of all of this, who did what, when, all of that. But it does really matter. Why? Because serious questions have been asked once again about the Prime Minister's judgment and his leadership. His government was supposed to be led by the North Star of integrity, accountability and stability. So how's it gone so very wrong? Well, Kemi Badenoch summed it up in the Commons. First, the appointment.
He promised them probity. What he's given them is cronyism and an old boys club.
The PM's accountability.
The head of the Foreign Office was sacked for the Prime Minister's own failings. His backbenchers know that is not fair.
And on the consequences of it all...
This was not due process. Everyone knows the price of misleading the House. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
And look, bear with me, forgive me, please, just to go back to the process. The reason it does matter is that if a Prime Minister has deliberately misled Parliament, well, that is a resigning matter, and that really is important. And on that, the Prime Minister had a solid defence. He said he didn't knowingly mislead Parliament because he wasn't in possession of all the facts.
Foreign Office officials granted security clearance to Mandelson against the recommendation of UK security vetting. It's clearly information that I should have been given. I believe not sharing it was a serious error of judgment. The fact that it wasn't was a very serious error of judgment. That was a serious error of judgment.
That was pretty loud and clear. He thinks that Ollie Robbins, the head of the Foreign Office that he just sacked, made the wrong judgment call. Ironic that, isn't it? Because Keir Starmer himself said on Monday in the Commons that he had made an error of judgment. Have a listen.
Yes, it was my decision. It was an error of judgment.
The PM apologised for that mistake, but he hasn't resigned, and his opponents would say it looks like there's one rule for him and another for others, given that it was the serious error of judgment that Ollie Robbins made in the Prime Minister's opinion that cost Ollie Robbins his job. And look, this is a party united for now because they've got critical elections coming up on May the 7th. But I can't help but ask that in a different political environment, the response from the party and from his cabinet might not have been as forgiving as it has this week.
That was Beth there. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is with me now. John, the Prime Minister thinks he's putting it all behind him, but I wonder, you know what John thinks, I wonder if we're in the eye of the storm now where things are calmest, because we've got Morgan McSweeney going to have to give evidence next week.
That's next Tuesday, Dame Emily Thornberry announced today, yes, and a few others as well. Tomorrow, actually, it's Kat Little. She's the permanent secretary at the Cabinet Office. Now, the significance of her, she was one of the two top civil servants, along with Antonio Romeo, who knew about this vetting debacle back in March and didn't see fit to tell the Prime Minister. So she's being quizzed tomorrow. McSweeney next Tuesday. Two others. Sir Philip Barton. Now, he is the former, he was Ollie Robbins' predecessor at the Foreign Office. Emily Thornberry claimed that McSweeney called him and using an expletive, said, just approve it. So we'll see what he has to say. And a guy called Ian Collard, he's a security chief involved in vetting and so on at the Foreign Office. But the Tories will try and keep up the pressure. They're trying to get the Privileges Committee to have an inquiry into Starmer. Exactly what Labour did to Boris Johnson to get rid of him during Partygate. That committee found that he had misled the House of Commons, lied to you and me. I mean, it's interesting. A few days ago, Kemi Badenoch kept using the word lies, and then on Monday, I was rather surprised. She didn't call for Keir Starmer to go on Monday, but she did today. Yeah. Ed Davey did. And we heard from Ellie Chowns, the Green Party MP today. She did as well. No, the Prime Minister's not out of trouble by any means. You've just mentioned the MP for Hartlepool, Jonathan Brash, who's gone public today. Not many have gone public. Privately, plenty of them are sort of head in hands and in despair. And I've noticed this week, both on Monday during the PM's long statement, 2 hours, 25 minutes, and today, Prime Minister's questions, OK, there was a bit of cheering for him, but not as much as he would have hoped, no doubt. And there looked some glum faces behind him as well. It's grim, this. I mean, we're expecting the House of Commons to be prorogued, in other words, shut up shop, next Tuesday. So today will probably have been the last PMQs before the elections and indeed the King's Speech.
John McDonnell from Labour was sat there last night and he was saying there would be a challenge to Starmer at any other time, but timing with those elections looming is not good. Nevertheless, as you say, in private, a lot of Labour MPs are wondering who could possibly come next.
Well, that view of John McDonnell is shared by many MPs. Obviously, there are wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, and the Prime Minister is having to deal with all that. Here's the runners and riders so far, well, when are any of them going to get into the saddle, if I can use that phrase? Angela Rayner, well, tax problems still. She was speaking this week. She didn't twist the knife. She was fairly loyal. Some senior Labour people think that she's still got a good chance, but she's not ready to go yet. She can't till she's cleared over the stamp duty problem by the HMRC. Shabana Mahmood, not really ready. Not been in the Home Office very long. Also considered too right-wing, too hard-line on immigration by a lot of Labour activists. Andy Burnham, well, he's run twice before. He came, I think, 4th or 5th in 2010, and then he was run up to Jeremy Corbyn in 2015. He's not in Parliament. Of course, he tried to get back into Parliament in the Gorton and Denton by-election, but he was blocked by the National Executive, packed with Starmer allies. The only person who voted for him to be allowed to stand was the current Deputy Leader, Lucy Powell. Ed Miliband, well, he was leader from 2010 to 2015. He was the person who actually brought in the £3 rule for joining the Labour Party. Yeah. Price of a pint at the time, how times changed.
Gosh, good times.
That was the way it was sold, I remember, by his team. And, of course, that led all the trots in and who voted for Corbyn. He has said he's been there, done that, doesn't want to do it again. But not everyone believes that.
Right.
I mean, if you've got a chance of the top job in politics, you're not going to turn it down, are you? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he threw his hat in the ring.
OK.
Popular with the activists. Wes Streeting, some would say quite successful as Health Secretary, great communicator, but not trusted by many activists. Friends with Peter Mandelson, too right-wing. Yvette Cooper, she stood in 2015, didn't do terribly well. That was the election when she didn't win, and it was also the year that her husband, Ed Balls, lost his seat in Yorkshire.
Yeah. I wonder if there's some dark horses waiting in the wings.
Oh, yes, could be.
Al Khan's, his name seems to get bandied around a bit. He's fairly new at this.
Yeah, he was only elected in 2024.
Exactly.
He's now Minister of State. He was appointed a junior minister, and then he got promoted to Minister of State. He's an ex-Royal Marine. He's a combative character in the House of Commons. He's seen as an action man.
Literally. Seen him doing pull-ups.
And swimming, all the sort of exercises that we ought to do, but I don't. You perhaps do. Well. But no, he's an action man. I think he's one for the future, certainly. I mean, he's fairly new and he's untested. He has his supporters, but I think not yet.
A bit too soon. John, thank you very much indeed. Well, it could be the person you're about to hear from next, because he's one of the few to stick his neck out and say he wants Keir Starmer to go. Labour backbencher Jonathan Brash told GB News, "I've got to be clear, I'm completely fed up to the back teeth of this psychodrama in Westminster, the own goals that are coming from the heart of this government." Meanwhile, he says we've got fantastic Labour councillors, canvassers, activists up and down the country working hard and delivering for their constituencies, like mine in Hartlepool, facing local elections in the shadow of this absolute mess. They just need to get a grip, he says. I'm completely fed up about it. And I think it's got to the point now where I genuinely think that, as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, it's not a case of if, it's when. Well, let's put that to our duo tonight, former Downing Street Director of Communications for Keir Starmer, James Lyons, and former Conservative MP, Dehenna Davison. James, is he just saying what a lot of them are thinking, what a lot of them are too afraid to say in public?
Well, I think, in fairness to Jonathan, he's probably not a household name in the Brash household.
He might be now.
But I don't think he would necessarily represent the mainstream of the Parliamentary Labour Party, if I may put it like that. But it's usually a fair bet that if one of them's saying it, a few of them are thinking it.
Yeah. And Dana, you'd have been here before as an MP. Because what we all hear in public and all the chitter-chatter, the WhatsApp messages, the gossip that's almost constant in private, do you think this is the tip of the iceberg?
I think it's a really, really serious time for Keir Starmer now, because I think as soon as one person breaks rank, as you've kind of alluded to, it means there are an awful lot more having those conversations behind the scenes, whether it's on WhatsApp groups, whether it's in shady corridors, whether it's in the pub after a campaign day, whatever it might be. I do think those local elections are going to be really, really critical for Keir Starmer, and they're not going to be good. And I think that definitely could be the catalyst that leads to further people calling for him to go.
Yes, we will look at some of the polling a bit later on. Certainly where London's concerned, it's not looking good for Labour. Pat McFadden is the man the government sent out today to defend their tricky situation. He's usually very good at it. Make up your own mind, though, about how he did with Sophie this morning.
Normally, I'm quite forgiving when people say, I don't know. In this situation, when it was this time, yesterday morning, you must have asked the question. Or if you didn't ask the questions because you wanted to come in here and say, I'm really sorry, I don't know. I don't accept that.
No, I always tried to prepare, but...
So what did you do? Did you ask number 10 what happened?
The important point for me is...
No, sorry, this is an important point for me. Did you ask number 10 what happened?
So I'm told no appointment was made.
But
that's
did you
right
ask number 10... We know no appointment was made. Did you ask number 10 if it is true that Keir Starmer asked for an ambassadorship from Matthew Doyle? Did you ask the question?
I don't think he would have been right for such a post. I think it's right that no appointment was made.
Did you ask the question?
I don't know what conversations were held with Matthew.
Did you ask the question?
What question?
Did you ask number 10 if it's true Keir Starmer asked for an ambassadorship for Matthew Doyle? Did you ask that question?
I don't think Keir Starmer would have asked for this. I don't know what conversations.
Did you ask the question? It's a really simple... You know the answer to that question. Did you ask the question?
I have not asked if Keir Starmer asked this.
OK. And why did you not ask that? Because you wanted to come on here and say you didn't know anything about it?
No, because I don't think the Prime Minister would be in the position of picking up a phone on a personnel matter like that.
There you go, James. Sophie strikes a blow for journalism.
Yeah.
I mean, my heart went out to Pat there.
Did you really? Well, because he came trying on plausible deniability. Is that why?
Well, he was obviously in a sticky spot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess if he didn't ask the question, I mean, this is the constant refrain at the moment, is a kind of lack of curiosity, a lack of inquisitiveness. Is that a fair allegation to put to many members of the government?
Well, I think if you're talking about the whole Ollie Robbins episode, as we could call it,
all of it,
I think it's a little unfair to accuse the government of being incurious in that particular case, because Ollie Robbins has made clear from his evidence yesterday that he and he alone decided to overrule, disregard, mitigate, whatever you want to call it, red flags around Peter Mandelson's appointment as the ambassador to Washington. And he didn't tell a single soul about that. And it was clear from the evidence, you know, not even Chris Wormold, his then boss, who was cabinet secretary, was conducting a review into what had gone wrong after Peter Mandelson had been sacked. And it seems pretty clear from what Ollie Robbins was saying was that if God himself had asked Ollie Robbins about it, he wouldn't have told him.
That would be an interesting conversation, wouldn't it? James, thanks for the moment. Even if Pat McFadden didn't ask the question, Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey did.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure many of us in this House were shocked by the new revelations from Ollie Robbins yesterday. He said Number 10 told him to find a plum job for Matthew Doyle, another Labour crony friends with a convicted sex offender. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was asked on Monday whether Number 10 had proposed any political appointments other than Mandelson. Perhaps the last few hours have jogged his memory. Will he confirm today, did he know his office was lobbying for a diplomatic job for Matthew Doyle? And were they doing it on his authority?
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, Matthew Doyle worked for many years in public service, for me as Prime Minister and other ministers. When people leave roles in any organisation, there are very often conversations about other roles they may want to apply for. In this case, nothing came of it.
And because they wanted to move him out of the way to make way for James, but I'm not going to ask you about that, James.
I was already working in Downing Street at the time.
Fair. What did you know about this?
Well, look, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of everything I knew in Downing Street, but look, I think lots of people are trying to claim this is that political appointments to the diplomatic service are in some way unprecedented. Yeah. Actually, our current ambassador to Rome is Ed Llewellyn, who was David Cameron's chief of staff. Prior to that posting, he was the ambassador to Paris. And, of course, people like myself and John, who've been around for a fair old while, will remember that Paul Boateng went to South Africa as the High Commissioner under the last Labour government. Yeah, look, not unprecedented, although a lot of people will think about Karen Pierce doing the job in Washington, think she was doing a fantastic job already, so why bother putting Mandelson in? That's old news now. Then back to what Ed Davey said there, and also the Prime Minister's response. It's fair enough, isn't it, if you're shifting someone out to sort of find out if they can go into another job within the organisation, effectively?
That question aside, and this is not to cut across you, the Prime Minister kind of refused to answer that question anyway, and I think that's the problem here. You know, this is a Prime Minister that came into office claiming this would be a government of integrity, accountability and transparency. All three of those are feeling a little bit shot now, as is his stability point. He said this would be a stable government, and already we're less than 2 years in and it already seems to be falling apart. Yeah.
Look, John, it was Dehenna's line that I nicked actually at the start, saying we're in the eye of the storm now, where the wind is calmest and it's going to pick up again. It will be interesting to see what Morgan McSweeney has to say next week.
Yes, I mean, we all remember Dominic Cummings, an advisor to Boris Johnson. I seem to remember he was grilled for hours and hours and hours, wasn't he, I forget which committee it was, but it was probably the Privileges Committee, I can't remember which.
It was the Committee for Eyesight, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I mean, I suspect McSweeney will be loyal to his old boss, but having said that, Dame Emily Thornberry has already shown, with the claim about Matthew Doyle, that she can lob some potentially damaging grenades. And I think there's a possibility. And also the other people I've mentioned, Philip Barton, and not so much Cat Little, I guess, but Ian Collard, the security chief. She may be able to get some nuggets out of them as well. So the Prime Minister, I think as long as Parliament's sitting, which is up to Tuesday, the Tories are out to exploit this as much as they can. And I must say, the The Matthew Doyle thing came right out of the blue yesterday.
It did.
And I thought the Prime Minister's answer there was a bit weak, actually. He basically said, yeah, well, OK, with jobs for the boys, yeah, nothing wrong with that. James, have you been offered, what have you been offered, Paris, Rome or...
Yeah, Scunthorpe. I mean, look, I do think, actually, it's important to note that Ollie Robbins lobbed that particular grenade, and I think it was probably very premeditated. In fact, he came back to it later in his evidence, and I think it's been quite a successful ploy, actually, by a very skilled Whitehall operator.
He was asked if there had been any other political appointments, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but there hadn't. So, you know, as it turned out, Matthew wasn't interested in any case.
We didn't know about it.
Didn't know about it, wasn't interested, despite actually having quite some substantial experience in foreign affairs.
I also think referring to that as a ploy is incredibly disrespectful towards a well-regarded senior member of the civil service when him being sacked is a ploy from the Prime Minister to try and save his own neck.
I have to disagree there. Look, the Prime Minister had been allowed to mislead Parliament and to mislead the public.
He appointed Mandelson anyway, knowing all of the history of Mandelson. That's the biggest error of judgment.
You cannot say after yesterday, with a straight face, that the Prime Minister knew that the vetting service had raised red... He knew that he'd been sacked twice as a minister and appointed him anyway. He knew there were links to Jeffrey Epstein and appointed him anyway. Misrepresentation. So it is true that Peter Mandelson was sacked twice. I am old enough to have followed him around the TV studios during one of the sackings. But he actually served with apparent distinction in two roles after that. First as a European Commissioner and second as effectively the Deputy Prime Minister at the tail end of Gordon Brown's government.
There were controversies, though, during his time in Brussels, I recall, over some of his links with various business people as well.
Absolutely.
I did say with apparent distinction.
Absolutely.
Accusations of leaking documents at the time as well. Let's not forget that. Right, we'll park that for the time being. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up in a moment, inflation spikes as the Iran war causes fuel prices to soar. We'll be hearing from the man who led BP for over a decade on that.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
Been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
The latest inflation figures show how America and Israel's war on Iran is hitting us in the pocket. Prices rose by 3.3% in the year to March, largely as a result of soaring fuel prices. I spoke about the situation with Lord Brown, who led the oil giant BP for over a decade and is now the chairman of Beyond Net Zero.
Oil prices are high, but they could have been so much higher. I mean, a couple of things have happened. First is people are buying less oil. It's expensive, so people buy less. And secondly, we are drawing down global stocks. So that can carry on for a bit of while, but there'll come a time in May or June where people get really worried and the price would start rising again.
You used to run BP. Can the big oil companies be doing more to help people with the cost of living crisis related to this?
Well, not a lot, I think. They have to buy in crude oil at a global price, and so that what they do is they make a refinery margin, so converting it into products, and they pay a lot of taxes to the government. The government is actually quite a big beneficiary because it's not just the amount of VAT and other duties they get on retail goods, but they also get taxes from the North Sea.
Would you be granting licenses to Jackdaw and Rosebank in the North Sea for more oil and gas to come out, perhaps even more exploration there? And given that you are a former oil man, I'm going to guess you'll say yes to that.
Well, I will, but for different reasons. First, I think some of these commitments have effectively been made, and you can't stop investment halfway through. Otherwise, people won't believe you in the future. And not just for oil and gas, but for almost everything. Secondly, there are factors to do with energy security today. And we need to produce gas from the North Sea, and we need to store it here in the UK, because that's part of our real security. And incidentally, it's greener than bringing in LNG from America,
yes,
which, with all the transportation gas and regas, produces a lot even more CO2.
Greener maybe, but not necessarily cheaper. It's still subject to the global market price.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And, you know, the cost of natural gas in Europe is, 4.5 times higher than the price of natural gas in the US, because the US has a surplus, and so it's trading with itself, whereas the rest of the world is trading between other nations.
The IMF is saying that out of all the more developed economies, Britain is going to be hit the hardest by what is going on. Does that speak to fundamental problems with our economy?
Well, I think the economy is obviously dependent on a lot of trade around the world. Not surprising, a lot of people are, but it's also dependent on very expensive imported energy, in particular natural gas, which has for a long time been setting the price of electricity on the margin. The pricing of electricity is very complicated, and I think actually it needs a fundamental reform, because it requires consumers of electricity really to pay for all the investments in the improvement of the grid, whereas that probably should be paid for through general taxation, as it would be in most countries.
And just to finish off, you coined the term beyond petroleum for BP rather than just British Petroleum. Do you still believe that actually a greener future, a net zero future, is the answer to the problems we have now, bringing prices down as well?
Oh, yes, I do. Timescales are a different matter. But, modern renewables, wind, solar and batteries are in the country, they're very secure, and they're cheap. They really are getting cheaper every day, in amongst other things. So long term, it's essential. And, climate change is not a hoax. It's real, and it is affecting things, and we need to reduce the impact of it on this nation and other nations. Otherwise, our future is going to be a very different future.
Final question, to put you on the spot briefly. The government seems to be preoccupied with lots of other things at the moment, mainly in the form of Peter Mandelson and the fallout from that. But if they were turning their attention to this more, and Ed Miliband certainly seems to be beating the drum for what you would like to see, if you could do one thing right now, if they could do one thing, what do you think it should be?
Reform the electricity market very quickly. That's really important. It's industry, it's our competitiveness, and it's the cost of living.
which the government has signalled in the past couple of days it's going to do, decoupling the price of electricity from the price of gas. Here to talk more about this broad theme is the Green Party peer, Baroness Bennett. Good to see you. What do you make of what he has to say? Because I imagine someone like you seeing that thinking this is a former boss of BP, he's going to be all about drill, baby, drill. But actually, you heard him say there, he thinks that climate change is real and a real threat. He thinks that green energy is the future, but there needs to be a transition to that. And he does think, yes, licence those sites in the North Sea, Jackdaw and Rosebank in the meantime to get gas coming into the UK. Maybe not necessarily cheaper, but coming into the UK from not as far away. What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, what we just heard was that fossil fuels are the problem. Fossil fuels are not the answer to our problem. They are the problem of our current cost of living crisis is behind a huge amount of that rise in cost of living. And the only place really where I differ, of course, the climate emergency is here and we are now experiencing it, the kind of flooding, the kind of damage, the enormous difficulties our farmers have had over the past few years. So the climate emergency is here. The only place where I differ is on speed. And sort of acknowledged in there was the fact that already the cheapest energy is renewables, wind and solar. Although, of course, we mustn't forget that the cheapest possible energy is the energy you don't need to use. And we need to look far more at energy efficiency, which is the great Cinderella that could really, if we insulated our homes, if we looked at how we can save energy, that could save us all a great deal of money.
It all costs money, though, doesn't it? All of it costs money, whether you're investing in battery technology or more wind farms or insulating homes. And in the meantime, most of those homes are still heated by gas. So you can't just turn it off tomorrow. So coming back to that point, getting it close to home, as he says, is not just potentially cheaper, but it's more environmentally friendly. Converting liquid gas in and out of that state to ship it around the world takes more energy.
I'm sorry, it's not, I think it was acknowledged there, it's not cheaper. We pay the global price for gas. Yeah. So whenever fossil fuel prices go up around the world, our prices go up wherever it's pumped from. But I think you also can't ignore the other problem, which is the carbon bubble. The fact that if we invest in new gas now, we're going to have to switch it off very quickly. And then we're going to have a huge financial deficit there, long been identified as a problem. And so you are heading in the wrong direction. You're heading in the dinosaur, the outdated direction, when what we should be doing is getting ahead, being the people who are leading the way on renewables and energy conservation and all of those things. And that's something that then puts the British economy in a far better position.
Do you think when people feel they can afford it, they're more amenable to this message? But as soon as inflation starts to go up and they see the price of the pumps more expensive, they forget about the impact on the environment?
I'm finding knocking on doors around the country, around these islands, more and more, people are saying, we can see that fossil fuels are the problem. We know where the origins of this surge in pricing is coming from. It's coming as a result of what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening to the price of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are the problem. The public is understanding that more and more every day.
Without getting into campaigning around the local elections, when you're knocking on those doors, it seems the polling suggests that more of those doors are happy to open to you.
We're getting amazing experiences. I've been out quite a bit in London, in Newham, in Lambeth. I've been out in Wales, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland even. Yeah. And there's just such huge support growing for the Green Party. People want change and a plan. That's what they're looking for. And they're fed up with the old ways of doing politics. They want something that really does give them hope. And they're finding it with us.
Knowing it's you, by the way, getting around the country, I'm sure you're going by public transport. That in itself must be quite frustrating. There's an underground strike in London today, for example.
Well, I'm really looking forward to, if there's one government policy I'm very happy it's about, is they're going to make delay repay for trains. They're going to make it one website instead of every individual company. I have the accounts on more delay repay websites than I can count. And I'm really looking forward to just only having one website to do my weekly delay repay reclaim forms.
But you rarely get more than like a fifth back. It's so annoying. It should be more than that. Anyway, we'll leave that there. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up in a moment, a new poll for Sky, as I just mentioned there, suggests Labour in London are going to get horsed, which means trounced potentially, and the Green Party and others may benefit from that.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to warn.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
A new poll for Sky News predicts that Labour in London is heading for its worst results since the 1970s, with the Greens and Reforms set to benefit. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
London, a Labour city for 5 decades. It really matters to the party. Let's show you why. At the last general election, all of these faces were elected as MPs in the capital. Quite a lot. Members of the cabinet, there we have it, including this guy, the Prime Minister, MP in Camden. So there's something particularly important for the parliamentary party. What happens? This is the last time there are borough elections, 32 borough elections in London. You can see how Labour dominate. This is the colour represents the largest party. 21 councils had Labour as the largest party, with the Tories on the outer ring, but a clear one-party domination. Now we've got a Sky YouGov polling projection for what they think would happen, and you can see the colours dramatically change. Labour, the largest party in 15 of the councils here, down 6. Tories down 1 on 5. Lib Dems up 1 on 4. Now, we've got 2 parties that really come from scratch. One is the Green Party here in central London, and you've got Reform in outer London coming up there. So let's look in a bit more detail. Now, it's important to say that there's quite a big margin for error. Some of these results, projections, are based on quite fine margins. But nevertheless, in outer London, Barking and Dagenham is projected to go Reform, as is Bromley, as is Havering. In inner London, look at this, the Greens could be the largest party in Lambeth, in Lewisham, Waltham Forest in the east, and Hackney in the east as well, with the Tories potentially on course to be the largest party in Barnet. Croydon, that's grey because there's 0.1% between Labour and the Tories, so really very close. So that gives you an indication of what might change. But let's look at this in a historical perspective. This is back over time, over 50 years, and you can see 50 years ago, pretty much, that Labour and the Tories were pretty much neck and neck. That's changed over the years, but Labour always with a pretty strong holding. That was last time round. And here are the percentages for this time. You can see Labour down a lot on 26%, Tories 17, Lib Dems 15. It's the Greens having a big jump there on 22, and Reform UK on 14%. So that's quite a big mix. Multi-party politics hits the capital. Now let's look at how London does better for Labour than anywhere else. The last election, 48% voted Labour, and it was the most popular place for the party, more popular than anywhere else in any of these other regions. Right now, Labour's figure has dropped in the capital to 25%, but it's still the part of the country most likely to vote for Labour. So that is the picture. I think MPs will be watching the capital very closely, worried about their own seats, particularly the man at the centre, Keir Starmer, a London man. His future depends on what happens there.
We're going to chew this over with the panel now. We've been joined by YouGov's Head of Elections and Political and Social Data, Patrick English. Good to see you, Patrick. People will look at that last bar of Sam's bar chart there and say it could almost be a 5-way split in London between all of the parties next time round.
It certainly could, yes, and that is reflective really of what we've been seeing across the country, the fragmentation of the vote from Labour and the Conservatives to sort of all corners. The Greens doing well, Reform doing well, the Democrats even perhaps picking up some momentum in Merton, and they're looking really good in some of their strongholds too. And what we're seeing really, I think, is this destruction really of the old ways of voting, the idea that people go out and vote routinely for the same parties and things flip between the two. What we're seeing in London and what we're seeing up and down the country is that's simply no longer the case. Multi-party politics is very much cemented now here in the capital, as it has been in many other parts of the country for quite some time now.
Are people giving reasons why that is the case?
Yes, there's a lot of frustration, really. A lot of people are very frustrated with what mainstream politics has had to offer them recently in recent cycles. They voted, of course, in 2024 for change. They arranged themselves, even within constituencies, to best remove the Conservatives and put in another party when eventually the Labour majority, huge majority, came out of that. And they haven't really seen much change, is what they tell us. And there's a lot of frustration with that, and they are therefore looking elsewhere to other parties, other potential angles, other potential offerings to perhaps deliver that change. And it's no surprise, really, that they're going to, on the left, the Greens, and in Wales as well, Plaid Cymru, and on the right, Reform UK, the SNP as well, looks set to do very well in Scotland, according to our latest projections.
You mentioned Wales there, and it is very interesting because Labour have been in power in the Senedd constantly, but it doesn't look like it's going to be the case if the polling's to be believed after May the 7th.
That's exactly right. If our projections are correct, and of course we certainly back ourselves there, it's a two-way fight really between Reform and Plaid Cymru, I should say. And our latest projection released yesterday has that race back neck and neck. We had Plaid slightly ahead before, but the new sample data suggests a little bit of momentum for Reform. And it looks to be a very, very tight race there. We're going to have another projection just before the election itself, and we'll see what's changed there, if anything. But it's looking like a two-horse race, again, between two parties, not the traditional parties that have been in power in Wales or contesting for power in Wales. There's a very different dynamic there indeed.
Do we think, James and Henna, that the Greens are parking their tanks on the left wing of the Labour Party and Reform are parking theirs on the right wing of the Conservative Party? That's why things are shifting.
It feels like it, and I think, you're absolutely right that there is a level of frustration, I think, with both of the main parties in recent years. I think people are so engaged on campaigns and issues and the things that affect them and don't necessarily feel that Westminster and the main parties there have been speaking to them.
Yes.
And so I think whenever there is a party that seems a little bit more anti-establishment, that seems to come from left field, that has voices that aren't afraid to be a bit more brash or a bit more human or whatever it might be and be a bit different and not mainstream, you can understand why that does attract some support.
James?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, these findings don't surprise me at all. I've been saying for some time that inside the Labour Party, people know it's going to be grim in Wales, it's going to be grim in Scotland, and obviously it's going to be grim across lots of England. But I think London holds a special place in the kind of Labour psyche, and I don't think people in the party have internalised quite how bad it could be. And I think that the surprise of that could be what potentially triggers a move after the elections. I mean, someone told me the other day, and I don't know if this is true or not, but almost half of Labour members are in London. So, this is a visceral thing. And now, look, I live in a bit of London that isn't changing on that map, but I think that's because the People's Front of Judea in the form of your party are taking on the People's Judean Front in the form of the Green Party.
Like the Monty Python stuff. Just very quickly, talking about wings, though, seems for some people a little bit outdated. You hear of people thinking they feel like they're Reform one day and actually they're Green then the other. If we're talking traditional wings of politics, right and left, that's almost unimaginable. But it's happening.
It is happening, and I think back to sort of the 2018, 2019 local elections, and we first started really seeing a Green gain from Conservative popping up on the screens more and more. And voters don't really think about themselves in these categories of left and right. They're quite useful categories for us to understand politics, but really for the voter, they're not really looking for parties in a certain ideological position, really. Most of the time, they're looking for parties and politicians that sound like they have answers to the questions that they want answering.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter so much for a lot of them where on the spectrum that lies.
It feels like we've had that for a decade now, since a certain vote back in 2016. Patrick, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. You are watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News with me, Matt Barbet. Coming up, the power of print. We'll hear from the New Statesman's editor-in-chief to discuss, well, this is a pretty stark cover story, isn't it? All alone, Keir Starmer is failing. Everyone knows it. That's his piece, and we'll interrogate it in a moment.
Coming up on the UK tonight at 8, we have an exclusive report from the front line of the fight against child sexual abuse online. We take you inside the organisation tasked with finding and removing extreme material. And we'll meet the analysts who say ordinary people are stumbling upon it in a way never seen before. That and much more on the UK tonight.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders. It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical. Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history. The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day. Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate. It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
The New Statesman is not the official House magazine of the Labour Party, but if such a thing existed, there would be no better candidate. So this is a front page that really matters. The headline beneath an image of the Prime Minister reads, "All alone. Keir Starmer is failing. Everyone knows it." The magazine's editor-in-chief, Tom McTague, will join us in a moment. But before we get to him, James, that's your old boss right there, standing all alone, looking pretty alone.
You were about to speak to one of my former colleagues.
There you go, there you go.
I knew when he was a mirror chicken.
I don't know what that means, but I'm sure you're friends. But what do you make of his cover?
Well, it's a very stark image, isn't it? And I've read the piece inside.
Yeah, it's excoriating, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not the first a piece in that tone that's been written by Tom, in fairness.
OK.
But yeah, I mean, what can I say? It is a difficult period for the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
He has been proved right in what he said in the House. Kemi Badenoch has been proved wrong. And yet we have all these chatter. I think it's been significant over the last day or so that you've seen 3 cabinet ministers publicly distance themselves from the Prime Minister's positions. And we've reached that stage in the government where there are leaks appearing about what's being said in cabinet within hours of that happening. Now, I'm not going to say the tectonic plates are shifting in the way that John Prescott once put it, but there seem to be some underground rumblings.
Let's bring in Tom now. Tom, you're a mirror chicken, apparently, but that's not what we want to talk about right now. What we do want to talk about is your piece today, which is, I mean, I'm not going to say what prompted you to write it. I mean, it's obvious when you read it, but I guess what prompted you to be so cutting?
Yeah, look, it's not something that I wanted to write. It's not something that I planned to write. It was something that is the product of, weeks and weeks and weeks of briefings from cabinet ministers, from MPs, and then ultimately it was the evidence that Ollie Robbins gave to the House of Commons this week. It was just quietly, but really quite damningly devastating. And it was that really made me think that what we all know to be true needed to be written down.
I'm not going to assume everybody watching has read it, so I will read out a couple of lines, which goes to the point you just made, Tom. One of them is, Robbins was appointed by Starmer and sacked by Starmer for doing something he said he wanted but didn't, and said he did want it only because someone else told him he should. That's it, as far as you're concerned, in a nutshell.
This gets to the heart of it. Keir Starmer, I don't think anyone who knows Keir Starmer thinks that if he could choose his kind of person to be ambassador to the United States, that he would choose Peter Mandelson. And yet he did choose Peter Mandelson, ultimately on the advice of people who he relied on for political direction of this government. Morgan McSweeney, and he is now gone. This gets to the nub of the problem. Keir Starmer doesn't really have a project in number 10. And so he is being buffeted by events. A prime minister needs to be able to decide the crises that they want to be fighting on. They need to draw dividing lines on issues which they believe in and they think they can win. And that is not what is happening with this government.
Tom, you also said a Whitehall civil service mandarin claims that Starmer has now taken on the traits of the man he really doesn't want to mimic in Boris Johnson. But reading that made me wonder if it's their fault or the system they find themselves having to operate in. They're not there for a long time. The civil servants often are. Both men would probably think they're the blob, as the civil service is referred to. Is that really the problem here, that they're coming up against this immovable object in these Whitehall mandarins?
Look, I think there's a lot of truth in that, because of the people who go into the system and come out of it saying virtually the same thing from completely different parts of the political spectrum. So you could take somebody like Tony Blair, Dominic Cummings and Morgan McSweeney. They all disagree on politics and they all believe that something fundamental is wrong with the civil service. That can be true, and at the same time, the way that Keir Starmer has handled this situation and has treated Ollie Robbins can also be seen to be, to some extent, disgraceful. And I think it's a part of a pattern that is worrying people. It's not that he's got a grip on the system and he's driving through reform of Whitehall. He is hiring people and then firing them for not doing the job. We've seen it with Sue Gray. We've seen it with the cabinet secretary himself. We've seen it with Ollie Robbins. James will be able to talk to this as well. But this is a part of a pattern now.
The other thing, Tom, just to finish off, is how politics has always been, is still being done. We've heard from one lone Labour MP today saying he thinks Starmer should go, when we hear loads of them think that in private but will not say it. Again, this is something you allude to in the piece, the inertia, the lack of, for want of a better word, backbone from people to say publicly what they think when they're meant to be serving the rest of us.
Yeah, look, politics requires calculation, it requires coordination, it requires assembling groups of people around a particular project, and that is happening in Parliament right now. So it's not that just, speaking off the cuff is what I'm demanding of the Labour MPs. But what I'm saying to them is that they can't go around saying Keir Starmer is not making decisions, he's indecisive, he is not able to communicate, and then fall foul of the exact same thing. They can carry on talking in private about their problems with the Prime Minister, but at some point they need to level with the public if that's what they think, or fall in behind the Prime Minister and make this thing work.
Tom McTague, appreciate you joining us. If this was inspired by Ollie Robbins yesterday, I look forward to seeing what you write after Morgan McSweeney appears next week to be grilled by MPs. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Tom. Let's go back just to finish off to our panel. I guess, look, thinking about the polls and thinking about the way politics has always been done and is still being done, does this all suggest that people want some sort of meaningful change, regardless of who does it or who the party is?
I think people want to feel that the government and the system is delivering for them. And I think most people at home kind of don't really care how that happens as long as it is happening, as long as the policies they care about in their neighbourhood, in their community, their children's school, their workplace, their local transport is working. And unfortunately, it's episodes like this where we're spending so much parliamentary, media, broadcast, everything time discussing an appointment of Peter Mandelson and not about the crux of the issues that really, really matter for people at home. That's the problem. It's become a huge distraction, which means the Prime Minister is spending more time trying to save his own back than actually delivering for people who voted for him.
It's a good point, James, isn't it? I've probably said Peter Mandelson more times since he lost his job than I ever did when he was in a job.
I don't know. He got quite a few mentions when he was in the job as well. Look, it does take up energy. It takes up bandwidth. It burns up oxygen of publicity. So yesterday there was good news on falling unemployment, wiped out. You know, there was a policy on banning phones in schools, wiped out. But more than that, it is, what it does inside the machine when you're trying to get ahead of that.
We did the phone ban, by the way. Thank you both very much indeed. We are at time. It is the UK Tonight up next with Leah. Bye for now.